My wife kept deleting our doorbell camera footage. Then one notification uploaded itself before she could erase it. I want you to picture something small. A little red light blinking on a plastic camera bolted above your front door. That's it. That's the whole story, really. A cheap $200 piece of hardware that was supposed to catch package thieves and stray raccoons. Instead, it caught my wife's entire double life, one overwritten video at a time, until the one night the cloud was faster than she was. My name's Nathan. I was 34 when this happened, married to Vanessa for 8 years, together for 11. We had the house in the suburbs, the one with the good school district we didn't even need yet because we didn't have kids. We had 2 cars in the driveway and a golden retriever named Biscuit, who I still miss more than I probably should. From the outside, we were the couple people pointed to and said, "See, it can work out." I traveled a lot for my job, regional sales director for a medical device company, 3 or 4 nights a week, some months. Vanessa worked from home doing freelance graphic design. It was a good life. I believed that completely right up until the week I started noticing the doorbell app kept saying one new event, and then by the time I opened it, saying nothing at all. Vanessa and I met at a mutual friend's wedding when I was 26, both of us slightly bored during the cocktail hour, both of us gravitating toward the one table with an open bar and no assigned seating. She made me laugh within about 4 minutes, which is a low bar to clear at a wedding reception, but one that stuck with me anyway. We dated for 3 years before I proposed on a hiking trail in the mountains outside the city, badly, nervously, dropping the ring box in the dirt before I even got the question out, and she laughed at me the whole time in a way that somehow made the moment better instead of worse. That was Vanessa at her best, warm, quick, able to turn an embarrassing situation into something you'd want to tell people about for years. I want to be clear about that, actually, because it matters for understanding how blindsided I was later. This wasn't a marriage that had been quietly dying for years, at least not from where I was standing. We still laughed together most nights. We still had a standing Sunday morning routine of pancakes and terrible reality television that neither of us would ever admit to enjoying in front of other people. If you'd asked me, any week during those first 7 years, to rate my marriage, I'd have said it was good, genuinely good, not perfect. No marriage is, but good in the ordinary, unremarkable way that doesn't make for an interesting story until suddenly it does. The doorbell camera wasn't even my idea originally. It was Vanessa's. She said she felt nervous some nights when I was traveling, wanted to see who was at the door before she opened it. I remember thinking that was sweet, thoughtful, the kind of practical anxiety a person has when they live in a big house alone several nights a week. I ordered it that same afternoon, had it installed within the week, set up both our phones with the app, and thought nothing more of it for almost 4 months. The first time I noticed something off, I wasn't even looking for anything. I was sitting in a hotel room in Cincinnati, half watching ESPN, half scrolling through emails when my phone buzzed with a doorbell notification. Motion detected, 11:42 p.m. I opened the app out of pure boredom, curious if it was Biscuit setting off the sensor again like he sometimes did when he wandered into the yard. But when I tapped on the clip, it just spun. Loading, then an error. This video is no longer available. It happened 3 more times over the following 2 weeks. Always late at night, always while I was out of town, always gone by morning. I told myself the Wi-Fi was probably glitching, that these budget cameras have a habit of losing footage during network hiccups. I actually looked it up. Turns out that's a real, documented issue with a lot of consumer doorbell brands, footage failing to save properly if the connection drops mid-upload. So I let it go. I am by nature not a suspicious person. I've always believed that trust is the default setting in a marriage, not something you have to keep earning back every day. That belief cost me a few more weeks of peace than it probably should have. What finally snapped me out of it wasn't even the doorbell. It was something smaller. Vanessa started getting cagey about her phone. She'd always kept it face down on the counter, which I'd never thought twice about. Everybody does that. Now she was taking it into the bathroom with her, showering with the door locked, which she never used to do. Getting a little sharp with me if I walked in while she was texting, snapping the screen dark a half-second too fast. Little things. The kind of things you notice individually and dismiss, but that start to stack up in your peripheral vision until one day you realize you've been quietly building a case against your own wife without meaning to. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I did something I'm not proud of but don't regret. I started paying closer attention to the doorbell footage, and specifically to when it disappeared. I began logging it. Not obsessively, not with spreadsheets and red string on a corkboard, nothing that dramatic. Just a note in my phone. Date, time of notification, whether the clip loaded or errored out. Over 3 weeks, I counted 11 notifications between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. 9 of them errored out completely. The 2 that did load showed nothing more than Biscuit sniffing around the porch light or a raccoon knocking over the recycling bin. 9 failures out of 11, always at night, always clustered around the same narrow window. That's not a Wi-Fi problem. That's a pattern. Round this same time, Vanessa's mother came to stay with us for a long weekend, something she did a handful of times a year. And I remember making an offhand comment at dinner, half joking, about how the doorbell camera kept eating its own footage, hoping maybe to get some outside read on whether this was actually a common tech glitch. or something I should be paying closer attention to. Vanessa's mother, a warm, opinionated woman named Diane who'd always treated me like a second son, laughed and said her own doorbell camera did the same thing constantly, that it was just how these cheap gadgets are these days. Vanessa didn't say anything at all during that exchange, just kept eating, and I remember noticing in the moment how carefully neutral her face had gone, though I didn't let myself sit with what that might mean until much later, when I had the full picture and could look back and recognize it for what it actually was. I want to be honest about what the isolation felt like during this stretch, because I think it's the part people skip over when they tell these stories. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, and it was lonely in a very specific way, the loneliness of suspecting the person who's supposed to be your safest place in the world. I remember lying in a hotel bed in Louisville, staring at the ceiling, running the numbers in my head like some kind of amateur detective, and then feeling disgusted with myself for doing it. What kind of husband keeps a log of his wife's deleted doorbell clips? I actually said this to my best friend, Jason, over beers one Thursday when I was back in town. Jason and I had known each other since college, worked construction management, now blunt as hell, the kind of guy who'd tell you if you had spinach in your teeth at your own wedding. "You're spiraling," he told me point blank. "Vanessa loves you. You're gone half the week, man. Of course, she's a little different when you call it random hours. She's probably just annoyed you're checking up on her." I wanted to believe him so badly. I nodded, ordered another round, and told myself I was being paranoid, that 8 years of marriage had earned Vanessa more benefit of the doubt than a handful of glitchy camera notifications. I even apologized to her that week, out of nowhere, for being weird lately. He hugged me and said she hadn't noticed anything different, which in hindsight was its own kind of tell, because I absolutely had been different, distracted, checking my phone constantly, and either she genuinely hadn't clocked it or she decided it was safer not to mention it. The thing about a slow-burning suspicion is that it doesn't go away just because you decide to trust your gut less than your best friend's opinion. It just goes underground. Mine resurfaced about 5 weeks later on a Tuesday night when I was in Columbus for a conference. I'd had dinner with 2 colleagues, gotten back to my room around 10, and was doing the usual scroll through my phone before bed when the doorbell app buzzed. 11:38 p.m., motion detected, front porch. This time, before I could even open it, a second notification stacked on top of it, then a third. Someone or something was on my porch for an extended period, enough to trigger multiple motion events. I opened the app with my heart doing something strange in my chest, that low, cold drop you get right before you already know. The first 2 clips gave me the spinning wheel, then the same error as always. This is no longer available. But the third one, the one from 11:41, loaded, fully, clearly. 'Cause, as I'd learned later from an actual doorbell tech support rep, the cloud backup on our particular plan sometimes auto-synced footage to a secondary server within about 90 seconds of capture, faster than a local delete command could always keep up with if someone was trying to clear it from their phone in a hurry. Vanessa had apparently gotten fast at deleting these clips before I could see them. But not fast enough, not that night, not for that one. The footage showed a man walking up our front porch steps a few minutes before midnight. He wasn't a delivery driver. He wasn't wearing a uniform. He walked with the easy familiarity of someone who'd done this before, hands in his jacket pockets, no hesitation, straight to the door. Vanessa opened it before he even reached for the bell. It was in the oversized t-shirt she usually only wore around the house on nights she thought I wasn't going to see her, the one I always joked made her look like she was wearing a tent. She let him in without a word, exchanged that the camera's audio picked up clearly, just a look between them that told me everything I needed to know, the kind of look that doesn't happen between strangers. I sat on the edge of that hotel bed in Columbus and watched that 11-second clip probably 30 times. I'm not going to pretend I handled the next few hours with grace. I didn't call her. I didn't storm out to drive 4 hours home in the middle of the night like some guy in a movie. What I did was quieter and, I think, smarter, even though it didn't feel like either of those things at the time. I saved the clip. Downloaded it directly to my phone's camera roll, then emailed it to myself, then emailed it a second time to an account Vanessa didn't know I had, an old email from before we met that I still checked occasionally. I wasn't going to give her or the app or a bad Wi-Fi connection a second chance to make that footage disappear. Then I did something that in retrospect probably saved me from making a huge mistake. I texted Jason. Not call me now, not some panicked 2 a.m. meltdown. Just, I think I need to talk to a lawyer. Can you recommend someone? He called me within 4 minutes. I told him everything. The pattern, the log, the clip. I could hear him go quiet on the other end in a way that told me he believed me now completely. No more, you're spiraling. He gave me the name of a divorce attorney his cousin had used, a woman named Megan who apparently didn't mess around. And he said something that stuck with me for the rest of that ordeal. Don't confront her yet, not until you know exactly what you're dealing with. People panic and destroy evidence, or they panic and lawyer up first and make it 10 times harder for you. So that's what I did. I sat on it. The next 2.5 weeks, I lived a strange double life of my own, one where I came home from business trips and hugged my wife hello and asked about her day and slept next to her every night, all while quietly building a case. I didn't confront her. I didn't change my travel schedule. I let things continue exactly as they had been because Jason was right. I needed to know what I was actually dealing with before I blew it up. I set up a second layer of monitoring Vanessa didn't know existed. There's a feature on most of these doorbell systems where you can add a secondary linked account with independent notification settings. And critically, independent deletion permissions, meaning one user deleting a clip doesn't necessarily wipe it from another linked account's access if the settings are configured a certain way. I won't pretend I'm some tech genius. I called customer support and basically had a very patient rep named Deanne walk me through it over the phone while I pretended I was just trying to fix a glitch. Once it was set up, Vanessa could delete clips from her phone all day long. They'd still land in a folder tied to an account she didn't know about, safely backed up, time-stamped, untouched. Over those 2.5 weeks, I collected 6 more clips. Same man. I eventually learned his name was Jason too, which was a genuinely bizarre detail that made an already surreal situation feel almost like a bad joke. My best friend and my wife's affair partner sharing a name. Different guy, obviously, a personal trainer from the gym Vanessa had started going to about 7 months earlier, right around the time I'd later calculate that things had started shifting between us. Came by an average of twice a week, always after 11 p.m., always gone before 2 a.m., always on nights I was traveling. It wasn't hard to figure out how he knew my schedule. I posted my work trips on a shared family calendar app we both used for exactly this kind of logistics. I had, without realizing it, been handing my wife's boyfriend a printed itinerary of every night the coast would be clear. I met with the attorney, Megan, during one of my supposed business trips, which by that point had become genuinely convenient cover for the first time in my marriage. She was sharp, calm, unemotional in the specific professional way that was exactly what I needed at that moment because I had very little emotional stability left of my own to spare. He looked at the footage, the timestamps, the deletion patterns I'd documented, and told me plainly that in our state, infidelity itself wouldn't dramatically change the financial outcome of a divorce. But that documented, time-stamped evidence of a pattern of deception would be extremely useful if things got contentious, particularly around the house, which was solely in my name from before the marriage, and around any claims Vanessa might later make about the timeline of our separation. I want to pause here and say something about the isolation of this period because it deserves more than a passing mention. I couldn't tell my mother. I couldn't tell most of my friends because half of them were also Vanessa's friends by that point, 8 years deep into a shared social circle, and I genuinely didn't know who I could trust not to say something, intentionally or not. Jason was it. Jason and eventually Megan. Went to work every day and smiled at coworkers and closed sales calls and came home and ate dinner across the table from a woman I now knew was lying to my face on a semi-weekly basis. And I said nothing because I was terrified that tipping my hand too early would let her destroy evidence, get her story straight, or worse, make me the villain of a narrative where I was actually, for once in my life, the person who'd been wronged. The plan Megan and I settled on was simple. I told Vanessa I had a 3-night trip to Denver coming up, a real one, already on the calendar, already booked. What I didn't tell her was that I'd be flying back a full day early, landing at 9 p.m. instead of the following afternoon, and that Jason, my Jason, would be waiting in the driveway 2 houses down in his truck, so my car wouldn't be sitting in front of the house giving anything away. Left for that trip on a Tuesday morning, kissed Vanessa goodbye at the door, told her I loved her, and meant it in the strange, grieving way you can mean something you know is already dying. I flew to Denver, sat through one single conference session I genuinely could not tell you a single detail about, and then took a cab straight back to the airport for my flight home that same evening. Jason picked me up right on schedule. We sat in his truck down the street from my own house for almost 40 minutes in near total silence, watching the porch light. At 10:52 p.m., a familiar figure walked up my driveway. I didn't kick the door in. I didn't cause a scene on the front lawn. I used my key, quietly, and walked into my own home to find my wife and her personal trainer on my living room couch, close enough that there was no innocent explanation available to either of them, both of them freezing like a photograph the second the door clicked open. I'm not going to describe every second of what happened in that living room, because honestly, a lot of it is a blur. Adrenaline does strange things to memory. What I do remember clearly is Vanessa's face going through about 4 distinct emotions in under 3 seconds. Shock, then something like relief almost, like a part of her had been waiting a long time to be caught. Then fear, then the beginning of anger. The defensive kind people reach for when they know they're wrong and haven't figured out what else to do with the feeling yet. Remember Jason, her Jason, grabbing his shirt off the back of the couch and leaving without a single word, which I actually respected in a strange way more than anything Vanessa said over the next hour. She tried briefly to claim it wasn't what it looked like. I let her get about 4 words into that sentence before I pulled out my phone and played the very first clip, the one from Columbus, full volume, right there in our living room. I watched her face when she realized I'd known for weeks. Not days, weeks, that I'd sat across from her at dinner, slept beside her, listened to her lie about girls' night and late client calls, all while quietly building a file on her. "You've been spying on me," she said, and I remember that being the moment something in me went genuinely cold because after everything, that was her opening move, not an apology, an accusation. "The camera was your idea," I told her. "I just stopped letting you delete the truth." Fallout took about 4 months to fully resolve, start to finish. Vanessa moved in with her sister within the week, which honestly made things simpler than they could have been. Because the house was solely in my name and I had 11 separate clips, cleanly time-stamped, cleanly documented, there wasn't much room for the kind of drawn-out, he said she said divorce battle I think she might have tried to wage otherwise. Her family, to my genuine surprise, didn't rally around her the way I'd braced myself for. Her mother, Deanne, the same woman who'd casually explained away my doorbell glitch that weekend months earlier, called me about 3 weeks after everything came out, crying, apologizing on her daughter's behalf, which was such a strange thing to receive that I didn't fully know what to do with it except say thank you and mean it. Told me during that call that she'd actually suspected something was off that dinner months back, the careful way Vanessa had gone quiet, but that she'd told herself it wasn't her place to ask, a decision she said she deeply regretted once the truth came out in full. I didn't blame her for it. I don't think anyone in that family owed me the job of catching what I hadn't caught myself yet either. But it did confirm something I'd suspected all along, that I hadn't been imagining the strange undercurrents in that house during those months, that other people had felt them too, and had simply, like me, chosen not to look too closely until they no longer had a choice. Jason, my Jason, was there for basically every step of it, and I don't think I've ever properly thanked him for how seriously he took my paranoia back when it was just a hunch and a log in my notes app. He's the one who talked me out of confronting her too early. He's the one who sat in that truck with me for 40 minutes in silence, not saying a word, just being present. It's been almost 2 years now. I moved, sold the old house eventually, because even after repainting every room I still felt her in it some nights. Biscuit came with me, obviously, that was never even a question. Still have the doorbell camera on my new place, different brand this time, and I'll admit there's a small, dark part of me that flinches a little every time it buzzes at night, even though there's no one here to hide anything from anymore. People ask me sometimes if I regret how I handled it, the weeks of silence, the quiet evidence gathering, letting her keep lying to my face while I built my case. I don't. I think if I'd confronted her the first night I suspected something, based on nothing but a bad feeling and some glitchy notifications, she would have had an explanation ready, and some small, hopeful part of me might have believed it, and I'd have spent years wondering. Instead, I got to walk into that living room already knowing the whole truth, and there's a very specific kind of peace in that, even inside all that pain. You don't get to lie to someone who already has the receipts. The camera was supposed to catch package thieves. Instead, it caught the moment my marriage actually ended, months before I found the courage to admit it out loud. Funny thing about the truth, you can delete it as many times as you want. Sometimes it only takes one copy surviving to change everything.